What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to the returning viewers, and if you're brand new here, welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. So today we're going to talk about the best place to hunt in the afternoon. Now, the best place to hunt in the afternoon is going to be 100% anchored to a food source. So the best food source in the area is where those deer are going to head as soon as they get up out of those daytime bedding areas. This is going to be about an hour or two before dark, and they're going to slow mosey their way to their favorite food source. Now, this is why we put in food plots on private land, and we try to get them as best as we can by making sure that soil is right, making sure they're fertilized, as much water as we can get on them. Usually we just have to hope for rain in that part, but we want them to go to that favorite food source. So if you can create it with a food plot, by all means do that. It's going to be the best one. For example, right now my food plot has nice tender green peas in it with brassicas, with all of the egg fields in the area being harvested. I saw the farmer harvesting corn today right across the street from my house. A lot of the corn's gone already. A lot of the soybeans are gone already. A lot of everything is off of those fields. A lot of the farmers then plow them under, and the deer are left without those food sources. Now, even if they were standing, that corn's dried out, those beans are dried out, and so on, that food plot is still nice and young and tender, and that's because we don't plant it until August. So all those plants are a lot younger than what the farmer planted in his field. So we definitely have that nice young green growth. The deer are going to head there. Now, if you're on public land, you need to identify what that food source is. So if that's regenerative growth, where there was logging activity in the last couple of years, if that's just a thicker area of the woods, maybe near some marsh or some wetland that has things like red osier dogwood growing near it as we lose all the leaves off of everything and head into winter here. Also, it could be any sort of like young tender growth. So this could be box elders. You could be looking at like tag alder if you're further north. Again, those poplar regenerative growth, so anywhere that you have those poplar trees fall over or get cut down and you have all of those roots get lit on fire and start popping up those nice young shoots, that's where the deer are probably headed. Acorns as well. And of course, if you're where you can bait, maybe that best food source is just a big pile of yellow acorns in the woods. So whatever that food source is, you want to be hunting anchored to that. And I say anchored to that because in what I'm going to talk about later in this video is you may not necessarily want to hunt right on the food source. I have hunted on these food sources. A lot of times that's because of the size of parcel. If it's a smaller parcel, I don't have the option to go sit 100 yards into the woods because we don't own that part of the property. But in the ideal situation, you're actually not going to want to hunt right on the food source. And the reason for that is because those big mature bucks don't like coming out onto those food sources when it's still daylight out. Now they will during the rut, of course, and you might catch them slipping a couple other days throughout the year. But the majority of days, they are going to sit off in that cover 50 to 100 yards, depending on how thick it is and how much they can see in there. And they're just going to hang out in kind of like a holding area until it gets dark, and then they'll come out onto those food sources. I still continue to see that on my trail cams, even when I have a booming food plot. Those big bucks come out about a half hour after dark onto that food plot. So what you want to do ideally is hunt in that holding area, in that 50 to 100 yards off the edge of the food plot. Now, if you can figure out where that bedding area is, because again, they're coming from bedding to food. So if you can create a man-made deer trail that comes off of that edge of the food plot and bends and weaves, don't make this a straight shot through the woods. They want to feel like they're in cover, and you're going to take that away if you just give them this big straight 100-yard long wide open chunk of the woods. You want this to just be a trail that's like easy for you to walk on, that you're not hitting your head on every stick, but it doesn't have to be so wide you can drive a four-wheeler down it. You just need it to be a nice, easy, bending, winding, weaving trail that goes in the general direction of that bedding area. And then, of course, if you find a good place to place a stand, you're going to want to have your stand set up there. Depending on wind, if you're on private, I like to have a stand on either side of that trail so that you can hunt any wind. You don't want your wind dumping right onto that trail, which will happen in an afternoon sit. Your thermals are going to be coming down because the day is cooling off. So if you are sitting with your wind blowing at that trail, even if you're up there, say 20 feet, that wind may not blow over that trail. It may fall down onto that trail. So you still want to make sure that wind is blowing and dumping off into an area of the woods that you're not worried about deer being. And also just know that your wind will be coming down. It will be dropping down into those low areas and filling in those low areas. So if, for example, your bedding area is a low area, don't sit up on top of it and let all your scent just drift down there, because of course they're not going to come up that way, even if that's where that food source is. So just keep that in mind. If you guys are on public, obviously, just if you're having to carry your stand in every time because they don't let you keep them out there, just set up where the wind's ideal for you. It's easy enough that way. But you want to be set up there if you can put in a mock scrape. So even on public land, a lot of places will let you cut and hang things in the trees. As long as you're doing it with hand tools, just double check the exact regulations on the piece of property you're on. So you can set up these mock scrapes even on public land a lot of times. Just again, check. I don't know where you're hunting, just double check. But you can set up that mock scrape on that man-made deer trail, and you will set up a situation where that deer is going to want to walk on that path of least resistance through that cover to get to that food source. And because they know that that mock scrape's there, they're also going to want to stop and hit that mock scrape on the way through as well. And if it's these big mature bucks, that's probably going to be where his staging area is. These big bucks like to come to the edge of that food source, like say 50 to 100 yards off. And depending on how thick the cover is, if they can see the food plot, they'll just sit there and watch it. If there's does out there or whatever, now middle of the rut, he's going to go plow out there and find those does. But the other times of the year, he's just going to sit and hang out and kind of take inventory on what's going out. And then he's going to creep out there after dark. Now, the other thing that we can do if we have these food sources, these food plots, is I put switchgrass up around them. I put such a thick layer of switchgrass around these food plots that he can't see into that food plot unless he steps out onto it. So that's another thing you can do if you're on private land, you're trying to develop this habitat for yourself, is to like create such a thick barrier around that food source that he has to come onto it to see it. I also talk about in other videos how I intentionally do not create my food plots in big circles or ovals or squares, because if it's in the shape of a horseshoe like I do, if he steps out on one side of that horseshoe, he now has to come all the way around that horseshoe to see that other wing of it in order to check if there's does and whatever on it, which puts him walking through the entire food plot. If you're hunting on that food source, then you're going to have a shot on him. He's not just going to sit over on the edge of it over there where he might be out of range. If you're bow hunting, if it's gun, that's a lot different. But you definitely want to have that screen around a food source if you're creating the food source. If you are on public or you're just hunting a food source that's naturally existing, it's probably not going to have that screen around it. So he's going to hang out a couple yards, like 50 to 100 yards off to the edge, and that's where you want to set up your hunt. Your PM hunt should be in that area, that staging area, not on the food source, because you're going to have the better shot at getting him to you before it's dark out. And that's, of course, the issue with these deer all the time. They stand up in their bedding area when they want to head to their food source, and they start their slow mosey to the food source. Well, sometimes they just don't get there before it gets dark out, so why not set up closer to them than to the food source, and you'll have a better shot at seeing daylight movement and a better shot at the target deer that you want to harvest this season. Now you guys are like, great, I learned how to hunt a PM, Ken, but how do I hunt the morning? Well, I already put that video out a few days ago, so go check it out. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. That'll help trigger the algorithm to make sure you continually see these videos. Leave a comment down below, that helps too. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them there. I'll try to answer them the best I can. If you guys enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy this one. Otherwise, go check out this one, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.